Hey, here's another story for you about what it's like to go to war. This time I want to talk to you about Afghanistan because I was involved in Afghanistan towards the beginning of the global war on terrorism, and because it was towards the beginning, they really hadn't had a chance to develop the country with all of the amenities that the U.S. military likes to get into a war zone. It takes a long time to build up all of the stuff that goes into making it livable for soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, for the Space Force, for the U.S. military. So I'm in Afghanistan, and I remember reading stories about the Russian invasion of Afghanistan in the early 1980s. If you don't know how this went for the Russians, it was brutal, it was bloody, and Russia ended up leaving Afghanistan after a long period of time, almost 8 years, with not a lot to show for it. In fact, when they left, there was very little accomplished during those years of war. One famous Russian general made this statement: "The only thing that I remember about Afghanistan is blood, dust, and lice." And those words were going through my mind when I was going off to Afghanistan early in the war for the first time. Like I said, we really didn't have the ability to build up some of those areas, so we didn't even have the basic necessities of life. I ate MREs, these meals ready to eat, for a long time, and I can't even tell you how much a hot meal does to the morale of a warrior when you've been eating MREs for weeks or months on end. We didn't have all of those social media, all of the internet connections early in the war that developed later on as those capabilities got there. But the thing that I remember most about this first deployment to Afghanistan, well, two things actually. It was the constant, unending barrage of rocket attacks that happened to me and to my unit while we were over there. I was in Afghanistan for almost 9 months in 2003. And in those 9 months, we came under 104 different rocket attacks. Some rocket attacks lasted for 1 or 2 rockets. Some of them lasted for 100 rockets. I lost count of the thousands of rockets that were fired at me and my men during the early phase of the war in Afghanistan. Now, I'm quoting the early phases of the war because I went to Afghanistan 8 more times in the next 10 years, and I saw the country gradually changing as the U.S. military built up our capabilities in Afghanistan. But there's one thing besides those rocket attacks that will stick with me for the rest of my life, and it's the dirt in Afghanistan. I went 52 days without taking a shower. The best that I could get is dust my uniform off and use some baby wipes to rub underneath my armpits and in other delicate areas I'm not going to talk about in this video. But that's the longest period of my entire life, even including Ranger School, the longest period of my life that I went without a shower. I can't imagine how bad I stunk, but I do remember how dirty I was when I first took a shower of freezing cold water in the early months of winter in Afghanistan. And frankly, I was so dusty and so dirty that although this water was physically painful when it hit my body, I would have stayed in that shower for an hour just to try to rub the dirt and the grime off of me. There's never been another time in my life, and I've been very dirty and in the dust in combat missions and in training missions for almost 20 years. There's never been a time in my life that I have been that dirty and have felt that inhuman. And I think what I want you to understand from this video is if you're part of the tip of the spear, if you're part of that initial invasion force, then you are going to go through intense periods of dirt and grime. When I went to combat for the first time, I made the mistake of wearing boxer brief underwear when I was in Panama. And I was in the jungles of Panama and in the dirt for so long that the underwear literally rotted off of my body. And I had to use a knife and cut it up and just throw it in the garbage. It was so dirty and so rotten from the constant rain and the mud and the dirt. Panama, I got dirty. Ranger school, I lived in the dirt, ate out of the dirt, slept in the dirt, but nothing was as bad in my entire combat career as those first 52 days without a shower in Afghanistan. I'll never forget how dirty I was. And you'll have to learn to just adapt to the environment and take a chance to get refreshed whenever you can if you're part of the initial invasion force of the next war. And it's something that nobody really even talked to me about. I didn't even really understand what to expect. And so the reason I'm filming this video for you is to just prepare you for the dirt and the grime and the jungle rot or whatever it is that you're going to experience in the next combat operations that the United States military takes part in. The thing that I will never forget about that first tour in Afghanistan is all of the 104 millimeter rockets. But even more memorable for me was the dirt and grime that I lived in for almost 2 months. Just some thoughts about what it's like to go to war. See you next time.